Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 2 for this news report today, Monday, January 7th, 2013. I'm Darko. I'm going to give it a shot again here, guys. Probably won't work, but let's see. We left off with Defiant Assad pledges to continue fighting, and in parentheses, like I said, fighting the terrorists that are supported by the West. He also vowed to fight to the death. I went through all this stuff, and this is where Firefox crashed here and that. I'll try to go through this again. Mr. Assad set out a series of steps he said would provide a solution to the crisis, which included outside powers to stop arming what he called terrorist groups. The army would then halt military operations while reserving the right to defend state interests. Also, the government would then contact what he termed Syrian individuals and political parties to engage in a conference of national dialogue. I think those are the actual opposition that initially started after the Arab Spring, which again was induced by high food prices and provocateuring and color revolutions by the West. The conference would try to establish a national charter that would be put to a referendum leading to parliamentary elections and a new government. So this was originally already supposed to be planned, I believe, for 2013, 2014, but the West didn't like that. They don't want that for them to decide it themselves. So the BBC's James Reynolds, I don't even know if the BBC has any credibility with everything that they've been exposed over, says the president's latest words are unlikely to persuade any in the opposition. He's talking about the armed terrorists, not the actual peaceful activists that we're talking about just there, that he was ready to discuss a viable transition. Okay, so now moving on to this next article, I have to wait for it to load here. Assad calls for national mobilization to fight al-Qaeda terrorists. Says the Assad presented what he describes as a new initiative on Sunday to end the country's war, calling for national mobilization to fight against al-Qaeda terrorists. Assad spoke confidently for about an hour before a crowd of cheering loyalists who occasionally interrupted him to shout and applaud, at one point raising their fists and chanting, "With blood and soul we sacrifice for you, O Bashar." At the end of the speech, supporters rushed to the stage, mobbing him and shouting. I saw this in the video. It was pretty crazy. I thought they were like opposition or something. I guess they were supporters. God, Syria, and Bashar is enough, as smiling Assad waved and was escorted out of the hall. Next up, Bashar al-Assad denounces Syria's rebels as murderous armed criminals. He offered no compromise to Syria's rebels on Sunday, using his first public speech in 6 months to rule out any negotiation with an opposition he described as nothing more than al-Qaeda terrorists and murderous armed criminals. So the president would actually be correct by saying that. But this is how they filter it through, saying that he's not going to be up for negotiation for anything, but really they co-opt, like everything else. These globalists co-opt legitimate grassroots opposition. So he's not talking about the al-Qaeda terrorists that are backed by the U.S., U.K., France, and Qatar and Saudi Arabia. He's talking about the actual activists that don't carry around highly sophisticated machine guns, kidnapping people, along with Turkey. They're also kidnapping people, reporters. They're also not blowing up mosques and blowing up and targeting Christians and killing them, blowing up schools. They're not hiring children jihadists. They're not beheading people on TV. Jihadist terrorists become beloved rebels in the public imagination from the excavator. It says, when Obama announced that he ordered the death of bin Laden, an untruthful claim, his zombie-like followers gathered at the White House to cheer the end of al-Qaeda's decade of terror. But it says, but while they were busy cheering, their leader was secretly supporting al-Qaeda in its armed struggle against Assad. This fact was at first suppressed, says, but now the whole world knows that al-Qaeda is leading the fight against Assad while being backed by the Obama regime, Turkey, Israel, France, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Yeah, pretty interesting, the hypocrisy. In Foreign Policy magazine on their website, they actually had a story titled 3 Cheers for Jihadists, basically 3 cheers for al-Qaeda. And here, this video, you can go check it out. I'm not sure if the links will be posted. Like I said, I'll be surprised if I can even get a full 15-minute video out at this particular point of the game. Syrian rebels praise bin Laden, celebrate 9/11 text. The Twin Towers have gone with the blink of an eye. Oh, how sweet is the memory. So it's just unfortunate because, this was done by Zionists and by Israel, an attack on U.S. soil. And so every white person and and neocon and stuff like that thinks that it's a bunch of Arabs and every Muslim that's responsible for it, when it's actually Zionists. I mean, it's a pretty good little tactic there. And so these people, who is really weird, they're technically extremists. Many of them are Sunni factions and stuff like that, actually, who talk about Israel all the time. We're going to wipe Israel off the map. They're actually working like pawns for the Zionists. So you wouldn't really think that at first glance, but that's how it works. American troops and missile batteries arrive on Syrian border. Just recently, I remember covering, before I left, was about the Patriot missiles. They were actually sending, by the 26th or 27th, they were actually arriving there, some of the Patriot missile infrastructure on Turkey or on Turkey's border. American troops and military batteries arrived on the Syrian border on Friday in the most high-profile escalation of international pressure on basically bringing out a regime change, like I said, according to the Brookings Institute policy. And I'm pretty sure, I go out on a limb here, that that policy, at least the concept, was already hashed out before the Arab Spring was even, on TV, before it even started. It says here the deployment of 6 Patriot batteries, including 2 each from Germany and the Netherlands, is in response to Turkey's request to NATO. It's interesting. Germany just recently, I just saw an article saying that they want to be a global player as far as on the world stage as an army again. So, but they also send troops with them with the Patriot missiles as well. American, German, and Dutch troops are staffing the 6 batteries of the Patriot missiles. It says to deter Syrian attacks closer over the frontier, but we know that that's not true, because Turkey, like I said, besides abducting and kidnapping journalists, they're arming the Jihadists, they're arming al-Qaeda on their borders and sending them back to wreak havoc on civilians and the government of Syria. So we know that it's not true. There's a good chance that these batteries are actually pointed towards Russia or there for Russia, because there will be a vacuum, right, once Assad goes down. Kind of like Israel, which we'll get into soon, where it actually benefits Israel to have all this instability on their, in the country next door in Syria. Turkey's been blamed for Lebanese pilgrims hostage drama in Syria. It says the families of Lebanese pilgrims taken hostage in Syria since May 2012 hold Turkey responsible for the kidnappers' foot dragging on the release of the hostages. They told Press TV on Monday that the region where the pilgrims are held along the Turkish-Syria border is run by Turkish security officers. The kidnappers, financed by Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, have told the families of the abductees that the key to their release remained in the hand of Lebanon's Hezbollah movement, an allegation the families deny outright. And it's about money. That's what it is. It's always about business, and they want cash. So Russia urges Syrian government to pursue dialogue with opponents. This is from the 28th of December, so it's kind of weird. We had Russia basically saying that, they were all talk before, and then all of a sudden they said there's no real military solution to this. Neither sides are going to win. And then all of a sudden they came out and now they're talking with the opposition. I saw an article about that. And then the Russian government urging the government to pursue dialogue with the opponents. Well, which opponents, right? There's 2 different factions. There's the grassroots real one, and there's the non-grassroots invaders. So from the 28th. So then all of a sudden, now you have Assad coming out and doing these talks. He calls for talks, says Assad's call for talks dismissed as a waste of time by Syrian opposition. They're talking about Britain and the UK and France and Qatar. Rebels say the Syrian president offered no meaningful concessions in his first public speech in 7 months. And what they want is what? They want a religious-based government, basically run by Sharia law and stuff like that. And it'll be catering their particular sect. So, whereas before you had Christians, you had Muslims, or all kinds of different Muslims, you even have Jews there living in Syria peacefully next to each other. Kind of like how you have in Gaza and Palestine and stuff like that. So next up, U.S. says Assad's plan is detached from reality. The U.S. State Department disparaged a proposals that Syrian President Assad said would resolve his country's 20-month year invasion is detached from reality. So it says here, the U.S. says It is yet another attempt by the regime to cling to power and does nothing to advance the Syrian people's goal of a political transition. So, this is coming from the State Department spokesman. Like I said, this has nothing to do with it. This is by the book, step by step, written out by private think tank and policymakers that aren't elected by you, don't represent you, to represent businesses, global corporations, and they want Assad to be ousted like Gaddafi so they can go in there and rape their country of all their resources, and then they'll say, oh, the opposition that represents, they're terrorists, so you'll have what you have in Libya, which is so bad, they don't even have the necessary medical supplies and food. Nobody wants to go there and do business anymore in Libya because it's that bad. And that's what you're going to have here, like in Afghanistan and stuff like that. That's what you're going to have in Syria. So yeah, you got to be able to read between the lines when it says to advance the Syrian people's goal. No, they're talking about international corporations' goal. They co-opt everything. Syrians ignore Assad's peace plan speech. So, the Syrians ignore it. That's pretty crazy because the last time I checked, the majority of Syrians actually supported the guy. But they say they're just going to go ahead and encompass a minority of people saying that, well, we're just going to go ahead and ignore you. So then you have British media seek to belittle President Assad's initiative for peace in Syria. It says, the president was accused of hypocrisy by British Foreign Secretary William Hague. Assad's speech is beyond hypocritical. Deaths, violence, and oppression engulfing Syria are his own making. That's pretty interesting because it's not. Empty promises of reform fool no one. So he said on a message on Twitter. Foreign Secretary's comments were enough for the British media to have their agenda and begin to undermine the initiative brought up by the leader of the crisis-hit country to alleviate its people's suffering. The UK's print media put undermining Assad's initiative for peace top on their agenda in line with the coalition government's policy. The Guardian had a report said opposition denounces president's peace plan as empty rhetoric. And also you have from the Huffington Post that basically it was too little too late. The Daily Telegraph also went on and said Syrian's president's roadmap to end the civil war ravaging his country is detached from reality. Also, the Daily Mail interpreted the initiative for peace as defiance of a dictator, saying that it was a saber-rattling speech. Iran welcomes Assad's peace plan for Syria, so it's just funny after all that. Oh, Iran welcomes the peace plan in Syria, so. And you have Iran to citizens flee Isfahan. So Iranian officials tell citizens to vacate city located near a nuke site. So I don't know if this is disinfo, but it says Iranian officials have instructed residents to leave the city, renewing concerns that nearby nuclear site could be leaking radioactive material. An edict issued Wednesday by Iranian authorities said that the city had to be evacuated because pollution has now reached emergency levels. However, outside observers suspect that the evacuation order might collaborate previous reports indicating that uranium enrichment facility near Isfahan had been leaking radioactive material. In this article, though, they say that it's actually pollution, so who knows? One person, state radio, told listeners that going outside Saturday would essentially be suicide. Says it feels as if God has turned against us, as one resident, so who knows? I guess normally this is a polluted place. They said it's actually in like a bowl-type geography, so. But the West is trying to strangle Iran, just like they're doing to Syria, except they've been doing it to Iran for a while now. They've been, especially with those sanctions, trying to attack the people, just normal people, middle class, lower class people, for as far as food goes, and now they're slapping more sanctions on them. It says here that STN to sue Hispasat, a satellite, over press TV and TV bans. International satellite company STN is denounced as illegal Hispasat's decision to take Iranian news channel Press TV and Hispan TV off the air, saying it would sue the Spanish satellite provider. And this is based off the EU's regulations regarding restrictive measures directed against certain persons, entities, and bodies in view of the situation on Iran. It's not the first time signals of Iranian channels have been interrupted, as Hong Kong-based Asia Satellite also took Iranian channels off the air, along with France's Eutelsat company. Iran says they had shot down 2 U.S. drones in the past 15 months. The Syrian crisis aims to ensure Israel's security. It says this is from the Iranian ambassador. Said the plot had been hatched to trigger crisis in Syria in order to maintain security of the Zionist regime, and the depths of this plot is becoming more evident every day. Israel is to build a 43-mile security fence in Golan Heights. This is GGN. Thank you.